Somewhere tonight, an animal strong enough to kill a human is going to walk within a few feet of one sleeping. And it's going to keep walking. This isn't rare. It happens constantly, on every continent with large carnivores. And for a very long time, nobody could fully explain why. There's an old rule that shows up in survival guides, park ranger warnings, and centuries of hunting folklore. Stay still and you're safer. Run and you become prey. It sounds like superstition. It isn't, not exactly. But the real explanation is stranger than the rule itself, and misunderstanding it has gotten people killed. Because the truth isn't that predators simply ignore stillness, it's that stillness sends a signal. And like any signal, it can be read correctly, misread completely, or ignored outright by an animal that's hungry enough not to care. Let's start with what safe actually means to a predator. In Yellowstone, rangers have kept detailed records of bear encounters since 1970. The data seems to confirm the old rule. When people were charged by a surprised grizzly and dropped to the ground, playing dead, they walked away with only minor injuries roughly 75% of the time. People who fought back during those same surprise encounters were severely injured about 80% of the time. That's a massive gap. Stillness looks like it works. But the National Park Service is emphatic about one thing. That rule only applies to a specific kind of attack, a defensive one. Most bear attacks aren't hunting behavior, they're panic. A grizzly that stumbles onto a hiker or feels a cub is threatened isn't trying to eat you, it's trying to eliminate a perceived threat as fast as possible. Once you go limp, stop making noise, stop resembling a threat, the bear's nervous system gets the signal it's been waiting for. Threat neutralized. Leave. This isn't unique to bears. Submission signals like this show up across the animal kingdom, from wolves to primates. Going still, going quiet, making yourself smaller. These are ancient de-escalation cues, and a defensive predator is often biologically primed to recognize and accept them. Stillness, in that narrow context, genuinely works, not because the bear forgets you're there, because it decides you're no longer worth the risk of continuing. Play dead with the wrong kind of bear, though, and the outcome flips completely. If a bear stalks you silently, circles you, or attacks you at night without any of the huffing, jaw-popping, or bluff charging that defensive bears display first, the National Park Service tells you to do the opposite. Fight, immediately. Because that bear isn't reacting out of fear, it's hunting. And playing dead in front of a hunting predator doesn't calm it down. It confirms the kill. Nowhere is that distinction sharper than in the Sundarbans, the mangrove delta spanning India and Bangladesh, home to the largest population of wild tigers left on Earth, and to one of the highest rates of fatal tiger attacks on humans anywhere. For generations, fishermen and honey collectors there have used a strange piece of protective equipment, a mask, worn on the back of the head. The logic comes from real tiger behavior. Tigers are ambush predators. They almost always attack from behind, relying on surprise rather than a direct chase. And forest officials have noted that most recent victims were bent over at the time, cutting grass, harvesting crops, crouched at ground level in a posture that visually resembles a tiger's usual four-legged prey. An upright, forward-facing human doesn't fit that pattern. So villagers reasoned that if a tiger always sees what looks like a face, no matter which way a person is bending or walking, it will hesitate. It won't feel safe enough to strike. For a while, it worked. Attacks dropped. The method spread. Forest departments across India have distributed thousands of these masks to villages bordering tiger reserves. And as recently as this year, more districts have adopted the same strategy. But here's the part that rarely makes it into the retelling. The tigers adapted. Longtime residents and wildlife researchers in the Sundarbans have reported that after enough exposure to the masks, attacks resumed. Whatever mechanism made a painted face effective at first, real hesitation, or simple unfamiliarity, it wasn't permanent. More than 300 people have been killed by tigers in the Sundarbans since the year 2000 alone, mask strategy included. The lesson isn't that the trick was fake, it's that predators aren't running fixed code. They're running a threat calculation, and calculations update. And the strange part is, the strategy hasn't disappeared. It's spreading again right now. Forest departments in parts of southern India have recently begun distributing rear-facing masks to villages near tiger reserves, citing the same centuries-old Sundarbans logic, hoping a temporary trick can buy time in places where human-tiger conflict is rising. Which tells you something on its own. We're still, today, relying on an animal's willingness to be fooled. There's a reason stillness matters to so many different predators in the first place, and it isn't unique to bears or tigers. Rapid motion is one of the oldest triggers in the predatory brain. A fleeing shape activates a chase and kill sequence that many carnivores can barely override, the same reflex that makes a dog lunge at a jogger or a cat pounce on a moving string. A motionless body simply doesn't fire that circuit. It removes one entire pathway to attack. But removing one pathway isn't the same as removing the threat. Hunger opens other doors. So does desperation, habituation, and the simple, brutal fact that an unconscious human is the easiest kind of prey a predator will ever find. Which brings us to the researcher who has spent more time than almost anyone alive studying exactly when that calculation flips toward attack. Since 1978, biologist Craig Packer has been recording the life and death of individual lions in Tanzania's Serengeti and Ngorongoro crater, building what is now the longest continuous predator study on the planet. In 2005, he and his colleagues at the University of Minnesota published findings in the journal Nature that stunned wildlife researchers. Lions in southeastern Tanzania had killed more than 560 people since 1990, injured at least 300 more. Almost none of the victims were hikers or tourists. Most were farmers, sleeping in their own fields. In that region, the biggest threat to crops isn't lions. It's bush pigs, nocturnal animals that raid farmland after dark. So farmers slept outside next to their crops to guard them, which put them, unarmed and unconscious, directly inside the hunting range of an animal that can smell them from hundreds of feet away. Many of these villages had no electricity, no streetlights, nothing but darkness between a sleeping farmer and a hungry lion. In a follow-up study published in 2011, Packer's team uncovered something even stranger. Lion attacks on humans weren't spread evenly across the month. They spiked, dramatically, in the 10 days immediately following a full moon. Hourly attack rates were 2 to 4 times higher during that window than during the 10 days before it. The reason has nothing to do with superstition, and everything to do with hunting math. Bright moonlight helps a lion's usual prey see it coming. Antelope and wildebeest evade far more easily under a full moon, so lions go hungry during those brighter nights. Then the moon starts to wane. Darkness returns earlier each evening, and a hungry lion already primed to hunt finds an easy alternative: a still, sleeping, defenseless human lying in an open field. Packer's team put it plainly in their published research. Nocturnal predators, they argued, are likely the reason humans evolved a fear of the dark in the first place. The need for fire, for shelter, for walls. All of it shaped by exactly this kind of math, playing out over hundreds of thousands of years. So, does a predator ignore a sleeping human? Sometimes, when it isn't hungry enough to take the risk. When stillness reads as not a threat instead of not aware. When the animal's aggression was defensive, not predatory, and your lack of motion gave it permission to walk away. But none of that is a rule. It's a threshold, and thresholds move. A grizzly having a panic response reacts to stillness one way. The same grizzly, if it's been stalking you, reacts to identical stillness in the opposite way. A tiger unfamiliar with painted masks hesitates. A tiger that's seen enough of them, or one that's simply desperate enough, stops caring what's watching. A lion with plenty of wild prey has no interest in a sleeping human nearby. The same lion, 3 weeks into a moonlit dry spell with an empty stomach, does the math completely differently on the exact same night in the exact same field. Every one of those animals is looking at the same still, sleeping, defenseless human. What happens next depends entirely on a calculation happening inside a brain you can't see, running on variables you'll never know. How hungry? How desperate? How much moonlight? How many failed hunts that week? Whether this is the first sleeping human it's ever encountered or the 10th. Our ancestors couldn't see that calculation either. They had no way to measure a lion's hunger or a tiger's patience. All they had was hundreds of thousands of nights of trial and error, passed down as instinct, then as rule, then as ritual. And across all of it, one pattern held. The nights that ended badly were the nights with no fire, no group, no wall, no barrier at all between a sleeping body and the dark. So they built every one of those things, not because stillness was ever truly safe on its own, because stillness was never the thing keeping them alive in the first place. It was just the last, thinnest layer of defense, standing behind fire and shelter and each other, hoping it would never have to be tested alone.